my groupmates and I will be presenting a topic called the effects of inflation towards a producer and a consumer in a country. But before we begin, inflation is an indication of value of money. Value of money is equals to purchasing power, which is the ability for us to buy things. Inflation implies that the increase in cost of living causes lower purchasing power, which also means it is the continuous increase in the general price of level goods and services in the economy. But it does not mean the goods and services price is increased alone. This rise in general price will affect in reducing the value of money because loss of currency value by the consumers. So meaning that consumers cannot buy as much as they want today as they could yesterday. Deflation, on the other hand, means the decrease in the general price of level goods and services in the economy. This is because it has lower money supply, which causes the value of money to be increased, which resulting the price to be lower.
Zulaiqa, and today I'm going to share with you guys the type and causes of inflation. So the first type of inflation is demand pull inflation. So demand pull inflation is caused by an increase in the aggregate demand, and the cost push is due to the increase in the cost of production, while the monetary inflation is caused by the increase in the supply money. So in simple words, this occurs when the economy grows quickly and it starts to overheat. So for example, it happens in UK, where at that time United Kingdom experienced demand pull inflation during the Lawson boom of the late 1980s. So this graph shows inflation and economic growth in the UK during the 1980s. The high growth in 1987 and 1988 of 4 to 5% caused an increase in the inflation rate. It was only the economy went into recession in 1990 and 1991 that we saw fall in inflation rate. So the second types of inflation is cost push inflation. So the cost push inflation occur when there are a shortage of supply of labor, or shortage of raw material, or crop failure, or a capital drive up the cost of production, and decrease in aggregate supply, thereby raising the price level. So in this case, aggregate demand remain unchanged or it's still equal, but since there are fewer goods and services, the supplier can charge more for each unit. So in simple word, cost push inflation is an inflation that arises from the decrease in the aggregate supply. Type of inflation is monetary inflation. So monetary inflation actually is also known as the overexpansion of money. So in this case, monetary inflation is a sustained increase in the money supply of a country, resulting in the price inflation. Few factors that cause the cost push inflation factor. So the first one is wage cost. So the wage cost push inflation is due to the wage increase that cause businesses to raise output prices to cover higher labor costs. The second factor is import push inflation is caused by an increase in the price of import raw materials, intermediate goods, and final goods or services. The third cause is exhaustion of natural resources or natural disaster. If there are many resources become scarce, the aggregate supply curve will shift to the left and the price will increase. The fourth factor is fall in the exchange rate. So a fall in the exchange value of the country currency will worsen the inflation, as exchange rate will cause imports to become more expensive. The next factor is government regulation or taxation. So producers are allowed to pass the increases in the indirect taxes to the customer, and this will push up the selling price of product in the shops. And the last factor is increase in the supply profit. So profit push inflation happens when market become more concentrated and more towards monopoly or oligopoly powers.
Before jumping into the next part, let me briefly show you the inflation rate throughout the past 20 years in our country to understand better. So we can see that the worst inflation rate of our country is at 5.43% in 2008. And we can also see that our economy is actually recovering prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. But due to the ongoing pandemic now, analysts expect that the inflation rate in Malaysia will continue to rise but also remain modest due to the many incentives and stimulus packages given by the government. It is also important to note that the impact of inflation is felt unevenly by different groups of individuals. So let's see how it affects producers. During inflation, producers and businessmen gain in the short period. This is because the cost of production does not rise as fast as the price of their product. So there is an artificial margin of profit here. But they will be affected adversely in the long run if the price level goes on increasing continuously, because the total consumption of their product would fall and would also reduce the profits. There are so many types of costs that the producers and firm needs to face during the inflation. Some of it are like menu costs. These are the costs of changing price lists. If inflation is high, the firms will have to update their price more regularly, and this also requires money. Second is wage inflation. Unexpected inflation may lead to an increased demand of wage from the workers. However, the firms might not be able to afford them. Third is uncertainty and confusion. If inflation is higher than expected, the cost of investing will be changing frequently, and this will make it hard for firms to invest because they are uncertain over the future costs, wages, future demand, and it will lead to lower growth. And the last example is international competitiveness. Okay, let's say if the UK inflation is higher than other countries, this will make the UK firms less competitive than the other international competitors. This will also lead to a depreciation in the exchange rate, which is important to exporters. From a consumer viewpoint, inflation increases the cost of goods and services, hence will also increase the cost of living. If the consumer's income increase at the same rate as inflation, they wouldn't be negatively affected because they would have more money in order to pay for their now more expensive needs. However, if income remain at the same level, the purchasing power of that income would be reduced, meaning that the same amount of money can only buy less now. Hence, if income remains constant, inflation will impact the consumer's buying power and also decrease their standard of living. I'm going to give you a few examples of the worst inflation or hyperinflation in history. First is Hungary. Hungary had experienced a very severe hyperinflation with a daily inflation rate of 207%, and their prices doubled every 15 hours. Next is Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe also had experienced similar inflation with a daily inflation rate of 98%, and their prices doubled every 25 hours. Yugoslavia, Greece, Germany are all the countries that have experienced extreme hyperinflation back then. Can you imagine having to survive in an economical disaster like that?
Nevertheless, there are 3 ways of a government in a country can overcome their inflation. First, monetary policy, which mainly focus on an open market operation. Their goal is to reduce the money income. With less cash reserve, for example, like selling securities, raising their reserve ratio, also the influence of a community bank in their size of bank deposit will reduce the purchasing activities of a consumer. Second, fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is highly effective in controlling the government expenditure, the personal consumption expenditure, the public and private investment. Government should impose higher tax to producer as increase in price of goods and services. This is caused to reduce in disposable income of consumer, which resulting fall in price. Last but not least is the direct control policy. This is to increase aggregate supply as well as reducing the aggregate demand directly. For example, like control pricing, this is to set or fix a limit of a price on essential goods so that anybody who sells things that are above the price limit should be punished by the law. In conclusion, those three methods that I have said before is one of many ways that a government can control or maintain the average price of goods and services in the country. But these measurements cannot be adopted alone as they work well with one another. Hence, the government should implement all these three methods together simultaneously to create a normal rate that does not affect negatively to the producer as well as the consumer. That's all from me and my group mate. Thank you.